This is Casey Barrett. I'm here with Tao Lin. For those of you who may have joined us last week, my apologies. My internet shorted out in all places in New York City. Now I'm back in the Catskill Mountains where the internet seems to be perfect. And you joined me from the big island of Hawaii. Thank you for joining me once again. Can't wait to talk about this incredible new book, EAVE Society. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for reading it and thanks for wanting to talk to me about it.
So I've, as we've emailed, I've been a fan of yours for quite a while, and I read Taipei while in Taipei, and my affection for the city goes to my wife's family, who all grew up there. In fact, my wife, I think, was the first to be born in the U.S. After a very big family, all from Taiwan. So my fascination is familial, but as I mentioned, I love the way you render the city, but also it's it seems you have a love-hate with the city and all metropolises. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. I wouldn't say hate. I don't think it goes that far, but I feel like mostly I've just felt uncomfortable with the health effects of living in the city. The air pollution and just how dense it is and how few trees and areas with nature there are. And I've had lung problems my whole life. My lung collapsed in high school 2 or 3 times. So the air quality I've been concerned about. But there are parts of cities I like. I like having access to so much stuff, so much culture, and so many bookstores and food. Like pretty much any food I could want is just down the street in a grocery store. I like those aspects.
Yeah, and it's I guess the spoiling aspects. New York's been my primary residence for almost 25 years now, and how long were you? How long were you in the city? I know you always reference your time there, and you were in Midtown, correct?
Yeah,
how long were you there?
I lived in various places. I lived there, I think, around 17 years because I moved there for college in 2001. I went to NYU, and then I lived by Washington Square Park. And then after college, I lived in Brooklyn, in Bushwick, and Williamsburg for like a few years. And then I moved to Manhattan around 29th Street in my brother's apartment in 2011. And then I lived there for like 7 years. And then I moved upstate to places in New Jersey and upstate New York for 2 years. And then in January 2020, after visiting my parents in Taiwan, I went to house sit my mom's college friend's place in Hawaii on Oahu. And then I've just stayed in Hawaii since then. And my partner has been able to move here too, because after COVID, she was able to work remotely.
Mm-hmm.
And now we live together on the big island of Hawaii.
So you actually got to Hawaii in January 2020 with no relation to COVID, and it seems to me like you weathered the pandemic probably better than anyone else I've heard of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was
it's kind of an incredible timing.
Yeah, the timing worked out really well. Yeah, interestingly. And then being here for the pandemic, I haven't really noticed that big of an effect just because it's so sparse here. When we lived on Oahu, we also lived in a pretty rural area.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't go to the city, to Honolulu. So I'm not really sure I just haven't seen the effects of the pandemic that much being here, except that everyone's wearing masks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm jealous hearing that. I mean, we were quite fortunate that we were able to come up to the Catskills for most of it, through the worst of it, but just going back back and forth, and then my daughter was back in school last September, and it's I don't know, it's as much as I love the city and struggle with living there. I mean, I understand the exodus in a way, and I think that wave will change as people get shut down 2 months before is kind of remarkable. So you freeze a little bit. Let's see.
Yeah, you froze a little bit.
You there?
I'm here, yeah. Can you hear me? Now you're frozen.
Okay, now you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. What about me?
All right. Yeah. Apparently, the internet problems follow me everywhere. But
Yeah, maybe you're just.
but I hear you fine.
Okay, good. Yeah, you were talking about the city and the pandemic. I was wondering how much of the time you spend in the city now.
During the school year, we're there, most of the time, except that every weekend we can try to get out. But my daughter's these days, so we're there for most of the school year, and then try to spend all summer as much as I can here. But there's that passage I referenced in my review of your book about I'd love to hear more of your thoughts on am I saying it right, the anions, like kind of air vitamins?
Yeah.
And the way forest mountaintops, waterfalls, seashores, like there's tens of thousands of anions, and in the city in shut rooms there's less than 50. Is that correct?
Yeah, according to this paper I read. Yeah.
And what does that do to your health?
You froze a little, but I think you asked me what that does to our health. And
Yes. Yeah.
anions are molecules or atoms that have extra electrons. And when people talk about being inflamed.
Wait, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that last bit.
I just said, when people talk about being inflamed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that refers to lacking electrons. And anions, they have extra electrons. So when you breathe them in, it helps your inflammation levels. And also when people talk about antioxidants, those are also anions. Like you can also eat anions in fruits and vegetables. So people just used to be immersed in anions and they probably felt a lot better. But there's a lot less anions in cities and indoors because a lot of reasons, but one reason is because with air conditioning, all the air goes through metal ducting. And when air comes in contact with metal, the metal sucks in all the electrons. And then also stuff like electronic screens also do that. They suck in the electrons and change the anions.
Have you noticed a difference? Now that you've been almost 2 years in Hawaii, have you noticed like health and creatively? Have you noticed a change?
Yeah, I think I have. With my health, it's hard to pinpoint like what exactly is helping my health, but yeah, I think my overall health has gotten better. I'm waking up earlier and going to bed earlier and finding I have more energy throughout the day and more clear-headed. But I've also been doing a lot of stuff to help my health, like exercising and meditating and going outside and eating healthy.
Mhm.
But yeah, I feel like all that contributes.
For sure. Well, I mean, speaking of health and mindfulness, I don't know if there's too many bigger authorities on the topic of not just psychedelics but drugs in general, and I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on that, because it's such a running thread throughout your writing. You know, and just to ask where you're at right now in terms of, are you still in a regime with cannabis and LSD, or is it just cannabis now? And you know, I'd just love to delve into that a little bit more, because so much of Taipei was, you know, to the extreme, some really hard hard living, and 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 I think Leave Society kind of found you, or the narrator, in a obviously a much better place, but also, you know, embracing the not just with pot, but with acid as well. And is that still something that you're believing in and using to beneficial purposes?
Yeah, yeah. In Taipei, I wrote about using a lot of pharmaceutical drugs, and that was like 10 years ago. And then gradually I shifted to using natural drugs like cannabis and mushrooms. And I've been on a pretty stable drug usage plan the past few years. And now I'm just eating cannabis. I'm eating it once a day. And I'm also using caffeine and kratom in controlled amounts, like pretty much the same amount every single day. And then I've also been using really small amounts of LSD every once in a while with my partner, like 1/8 of a tab at a time. And
So
I've found this good. I'm just trying to become more stable. Like I haven't had urges to use large doses of psychedelics to have some kind of ego dissolving experience. I'm just trying to get my life more stable and have a better mood that doesn't fluctuate that much.
yeah.
How about you? What's your drug use?
Um, well, I opened that the review referencing that I'm on two pharmaceuticals for anxiety, and then I have these the brand's Kiva. There's these espresso bean THC infused espresso beans that I think are fantastic, uh,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
I really like, I have to be very careful. I found with which weed I smoke. My
Mm.
wife is a firm or very loyal sativa strain
Mm.
smoker, and I find that worsens my anxiety. So I just have to be careful about it. And I really like feel pretty strongly about, like you said, like an eighth of a say a tab, or a, you know, microdosing in general. I know that's an overused term, microdosing, but my feeling is that, like, people that I used to revere, of, you know, 60s, 70s writers and musicians, everything, did a big disservice to psychedelics in general, because it was essentially advocating overdosing on them. And there's a place for that. Those, like you said, the ego dissolving trips, but um, they became so demonized because of that extreme usage, that I think so much of the psychological benefits are only now, kind of like 50 years later,
Mm.
we're coming back to that. You know, it's interesting. You know, you were in New York a long time, and you know, until very recently, you could have just about any drug delivered to your door except psychedelics. And
Mm.
now because it used to be like just unheard of that you could get mushrooms and it'd be incredible. And now, you know, pot dealers come over and they have a section with mushrooms. They have, like, there's just the availability and just the acceptance of it, I find really fascinating, but also just the usage has changed. So, and just maybe this is a weird like oxymoron, but I think the usage of psychedelics have become so much more sane, and much more accepted. So
yeah, I agree with that. I liked all the interest in using small amounts of LSD and mushrooms, and people have been fine doing that with caffeine and tobacco, but they hadn't really explored it with psychedelics, but it's happening now, it seems.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and there's more and more, and I'm not sure how far that extends culturally to, outside of, big urban cities or certain communities. I hope that continues to expand, but I'm not sure. But I've certainly had times of abuse of the drugs that you described in Taipei, and
Mm.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts looking back on that now. And it seems like you're so steady and stable. And what kind of sparked the recovery process that, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I would describe EAVE Society as very much a, a, a novel of recovery
Mm.
and like a recovery of the mind. And I'm really curious, what sparked that, because like I said, in Taipei, for those watching, haven't read it, it's pretty extreme how many drugs you were doing then.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think led to this shift?
Yeah, I feel like the shift, what led to it was just reaching a dead end with all that, with using pharmaceutical drugs. Because besides using a lot of pharmaceutical drugs, I also had a bleak worldview. I just couldn't find any sustainable, compelling meaning besides just getting high and feeling good and feeling emotional and writing about feeling these things. It just felt like I'd reach a dead end. And then that's when I encountered Terence McKenna, the psychedelics promoter, and he had a positive, optimistic worldview that I also found compelling. And he talked about how nature isn't mute, that it's people who are deaf. And that was different than what I'd heard before, because the philosopher Sartre, he talked about how nature is mute and that we're in this universe alone and we have to make up our own meaning. And having to make up my own meaning, I just wasn't able to, because I didn't know where to look. So I just absorbed culture's meaning. And culture pretty much just told me that I should just try to like promote myself and get more power and then be in competition with all these other artists and seek just money and fame and sex and pleasure, and none of that was sustainable. So when I encountered Terence McKenna pointing towards nature as a place to get meaning, that excited me. And then since then, I've just been reading more and more to find more meaning outside of what I call dominator culture. And it's been rewarding reading all this stuff. Like, one thing I reference in a book is reading this book, The 24-Hour Mind. And in that book, it talks about how dreams become more positive throughout a night over like 4 sessions. And that if you're sleeping well, you should wake up in a better mood every day. And that was really good to learn, because before learning about this, I didn't really know what dreams were for. And people have theorized it's just random stuff happening, or it's just to solidify learning. But now that I've learned that they're supposed to be helping me be in a better mood each day, that's just some more meaning I can add to my life.
Yeah, I mean, that's really thoughtful response. That I just have so many questions, and about it's one of the things I really appreciate and like in all your work is you almost give like a syllabus for, if you like this, here's a lot of other things you may find. And I don't know how many books you reference in Leave Society, but the kind of one in the 24-hour mind, when I need to seek out, and particularly the stuff with dreams, I had never encountered that mindset either, that they're supposed to be 4 cycles and waking up in an improved mood. Because I don't know, so much of my life was waking up as early as possible, whether it was to go train for swimming or to wake up and write before I would have to do the work that earned a living. And it would just be interrupted sleep. Like my whole life has always been kind of interrupted sleep. So I don't know, just that, thinking about that through the way you just described it and the way you described it in your book it's I don't know, I think it's a really, really important takeaway. That it's, I don't know, I hope anyone that's watching this and also reads it takes, if take anything else away from this, it's really listening to your dreams, but also the value of the getting the right amount of rest. It shifts everything. And especially after this past year and a half, when I think everyone is almost totally batshit insane. It's that's one easy life hack, maybe. Not sure.
Yeah, and dreams, the author of this book, she's researched dreams since the 60s. And she found out about dreams becoming more positive throughout the night by having people sleep in a lab, and then they would repeatedly wake them throughout the night and see what they were dreaming about. But another benefit of dreaming she talks about is that it helps you move on with your life if you've experienced something negative. Like if one day you've had a really bad experience, if your dreams are working well, it's supposed to diffuse that emotion by matching it with other stuff in your past. So when you wake up, it doesn't affect you as much.
It's like a natural trauma healing.
Yeah. And that seems like it would help people a lot now. But I feel like a lot of people just don't know about this, don't know about the benefits of getting a lot of sleep. And another book I reference in Leave Society about sleep is called Why We Sleep, I think. And that book talks about just how much your level of functioning goes down if you don't get enough sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And it talks about how dangerous it is. Like if you haven't got enough sleep and you're driving, I forget how many hours, but I think it's like if you only got 5 hours of sleep, it's equivalent to being like a drunk driver.
I can see that. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I've held jobs before. Years ago, I used to work in television, where it was such a badge of honor for those that needed very little sleep. And like the chairman of it was at NBC Sports, and chairman was Dick Ebersol, who I would describe him as like Darth Vader in like a baby blue cardigan. Like he was just a horrible human being. But he named his production company No Sleep Productions, and he was like it was like almost a culture of who can sleep less. And you'd go on covering whatever events, and it was sadistic, really, in retrospect, but it was such a badge of honor to only get 3 or 4 hours sleep and keep functioning. And however much caffeine you needed, fine, like just keep going and keep charging. But looking back on that now, it's like no wonder people get so frustrated with like some of the coverage on for sports coverage or whatever, where if you have a a community of people that aren't sleeping at all, and then they're broadcasting these stories to millions, billions of people, and they're not done with sound mind. Like they're quite literally not done with sound mind, because they're done with people that haven't had any kind of sleep for long periods of time.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like society really promotes this idea of not sleeping and just working really hard. Like in college, I remember in college, like all the kids would seem to feel proud of just how much they were working and how little sleep they were getting. But really, everyone's just been sabotaging themselves and not thinking of the longer term, of like looking at a week and figuring out how they can best function during that week. And instead, just thinking of like the night before the test and staying up.
Yeah.
And then in Why We Sleep, he writes about how in medical school they stay up a lot. And then how emergency room doctors or something, they have like 24-hour shifts. And these are the people you want to be the most alert.
Like when your life's on the line, you have someone like you said, who's the equivalent of a drunk driver because they
Yeah,
haven't slept in 30 hours.
yeah,
It should be
yeah,
frightening.
yeah. And then it leads to a lot of mistakes, like surgeons leaving in tools, leaving them in people, stuff like that. It seems like this book, Why We Sleep, it seemed really popular, which seems good. The author was on Joe Rogan promoting it.
Mhm.
People seem to be getting into it.
Which evidently, if you're on Joe Rogan, it's an instant bestseller because it's however millions his audience is. It's,
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah. I don't know how many millions, probably like tens of millions even.
yeah, it's insane. So what are you? I'm guessing you're quite productive these days. Do you have another book going, or what's your creative process right now?
Yeah, I've been starting, I've been taking notes and planning another book on aliens and UFOs. But I'm not sure if I'm going to write a whole book about that yet. I've just been reading and organizing my thoughts. And I'm pretty content just to not rush anything. I've been enjoying promoting this book because it has so many other people's ideas that I can talk about and just remind myself of and understand better. So I'm just trying to go slowly and carefully right now.
And how many notes? I think you referenced there was like 189,000 notes that pared down from. Where are you? Is this in your like your app, your notes app? Or are you constantly like where are you taking your notes? Is it on like an iPhone or in your by hand? Like
Or-
where?
Originally, it was on an iPhone, but I've moved it to a file on my computer. It's just a text file that I always have open and I type in throughout the day. And I also use it as a to-do list
Okay.
and like a calendar. Like I'll have each day written out and I'll go forward and back and type in stuff. And then occasionally I'll print it and reread it just to give myself more perspective and see what's been happening. It's been pretty helpful.
Well, I guess that leads me to my well, I guess it would be my last question because we were supposed to be wrapping up pretty soon. But I find it's a lot of memoir and autofiction, and I know there's a blurry line sometimes between the two. It can sometimes feel a little bit it feels overly fictionalized because I'm not sure if there's a lack of daily note taking. I have a tendency
Yeah.
to be really cynical about a lot of memoir because you're putting back together conversations that is really the memory is a very untrustworthy element. So but when if reading your stuff and you're creating dialogue, and I don't mean to say the narrator is you, and I know that it's a novel, but the dialogue feels extraordinarily authentic because it seems to me that you're writing down verbatim.
Yeah,
Fair to say?
yeah. A lot of the dialogue, or probably like 30% of it, is taken originally from voice memos that I recorded of me and my parents. And it's not exactly transcribed because it would be a lot longer and it wouldn't read as well, but it's lightly edited from that. And I agree about a lot of memoirs seeming overly fictionalized because it's just really hard to remember even what happened last week. And if you're writing about years earlier, you are pretty much fictionalizing or just, or I would just be making up a story based on my memory. But having all the notes makes it a different experience. I have to not go by my memory. I have to go by what actually happened or what I wrote down happened. Yeah.
Like some serious discipline to maintain it, I'm guessing too.
Yeah. It's helpful though. So, and interesting. So it doesn't take that much discipline because I can also just like type really fast. I don't have to worry about, it doesn't have to feel like,
It could just be stream of consciousness, and then you can edit it
yeah.
later.
Mhm.
All right. Well, I mean, I can't thank you enough again for jumping on today, especially after our boarded interview last time. But I'll read everything you write, and thank you so much. Give me
Yeah.
tons to think about, and hopefully everyone watching this as well.
Yeah, thanks for talking to me. I've enjoyed this.
You too. Thanks so much.
Yeah.